It's now my pleasure to introduce Spencer Harris. I'm sure many of you know him. Spencer has a PhD in communication studies from the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Yes. By day, he is the Director of Operations for Mostly Serious, which is a custom web development and digital marketing agency here in Springfield. And in his free time, he is basically a real nerd. He successfully, those are his words, guys. He successfully co-hosts a podcast that talks about board games and beer and is downloaded on average of 3,000 times a month across 10 countries. In 2017, he kickstarted a board game that consistently ranks in the top 15% of all project games on Kickstarter. And he is here today to tell you, share a little bit about his passion for board games and how he believes that game night can save humanity. Spencer Harris.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear me, so that's terrible. Thanks for calling me a nerd, Brian. It's really wonderful to be with all of you today. As Brian mentioned, by day I'm the Director of Operations at Mostly Serious. We're a full-service digital agency located over in Galloway. We just moved there in October. But in my free time, and probably the primary reason I'm up here today, is all the other stuff that I do. So you may know me from here. You may also know me from here. So this is the logo for the Mixed Six podcast, which Brian mentioned. For about 2 years now, we've been doing content on board games, on beer, on popular culture, general nerd items. We average about 3,000 downloads a month. We have 260 monthly subscribers, which generate about $1,300 a month in revenue for the podcast. And we have listeners in 10 countries. Probably also up here, though, because in 2018, I kickstarted a board game with a good friend of mine about ducks getting drunk at a college party. And so it really has always been a dream of mine to be on the same stage as the governor talking about my board game about ducks getting drunk at a college party. And now it strikes me I don't think Dee would care for that much either. So in 2018, we kickstarted Party Foul, the game of drunk ducks, and on Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding platform that I'll talk more about later, we raised about $17,600 across 350-ish backers, and in the intervening period, we've raised about another $6,000 on Backer Kit. So about $23,000 we've now made on that board game, and it should end up in people's hands in late February, early March. You may also know me from this picture, which appeared in Biz 417. In Governor Parsons' article, I did a whiskey and advice piece with Jeff Houghton, and I wanted to point that picture out because I don't look like that. If Clive Owen and Jude Law had a child, it wouldn't look like that. If you were really drunk and in a very dark bar, I might look like that, but my wife, who actually finds me attractive, saw that picture and laughed. So I just wanted you to know that some kind soul at Biz 417 is now my new best friend. So that's all the stuff I do in my free time. And today I want to talk to you about one of those passions. I want to talk to you about board games. But not really these board games. I want to talk to you about new board games. I want to talk to you about games like Azul, which won the 2018 Spiel des Jahres, which means Best New Game of the Year. And it's widely regarded as the top prize for board games across the globe. I want to talk to you about Scythe, which is my favorite game, spoiler. And Scythe is part of a new trend in board games developing or emerging over the last 10 years, which are Kickstarter-funded projects. Scythe raised $1.8 million on Kickstarter and has since become one of the top 10 reviewed games across a variety of platforms. And I also want to talk to you about games like Settlers of Catan. How many of you have played Settlers of Catan? Yeah, of course you have, because it's referred to as a gateway game. Speaking of things Dee might not like. I want to talk to you about all these things because this isn't errata. It's not new. It's not aberration. It's not weird. This is a big deal. So here, for example, is the growth of board game projects on Kickstarter from 2012 to 2017. You'll see an increase in $63 million. In 2017 alone, just the first half of that year, tabletop games projects made about $70 million on that platform. The board game industry is booming, and it's become a new part of our culture unlike we've ever seen. And that seems weird because we have all of this stuff that we could be doing, right? We have more opportunities to spend time in digital spaces on our devices, Netflix and chilling, playing video games, which are thriving despite board games growth. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that given all of these opportunities, to do things which do not require you to sit down at a table with other people, the board game market is absolutely thriving. Most industry reports suggest that by 2023, it will be a $12 billion market for a tabletop game. So today I want to talk about why. Why, in a digital world, board games, a very analog experience, continue to thrive. And I think that's true for a couple of reasons. At its core, I really believe that board games are a part of the human condition. They give us unique opportunities to fulfill the types of habits and patterns and needs that we have as people. In particular, I think there are three of those things. The first is community. Board games give us an opportunity to build, to interact within, and fulfill the values of traditional communities. Board games also give us a sense of ownership, and I'll show you all of the different ways that the modern board game player can participate in the production of a board game. And then finally, board games allow us to do something that humans want to do anyways, and that's obsess over things. They give us an opportunity to be fans, and we really like obsessing over things. So let's talk about each of these things, and let's start by talking about community. Board games are absolutely incredible, but they're not the internet. And we were told quite explicitly by the great minds of the 20th century that the internet was going to bring all of us together. It would be a great democratizing agent where people from all over the world, from different countries and backgrounds and ethnicities and socioeconomic classes could come together and share their ideas and their values and their beliefs, and we would be better for it. And that's not what really happened on the internet. For the first time in history, as of 2014, face-to-face interaction became the third primary mode of communication amongst dominant populations, because we started to spend more time having conversations electronically and digitally and less time interacting with people. But in the meantime, in the interceding period, it certainly felt like we were interacting with people more. I mean, it feels like we're all together on Facebook, yelling at a crazy uncle or posting pictures of a cat. The weird thing is we're not all together on Facebook. We're all on our individual devices sharing information. And it's created a sense of community that isn't a traditional sense of community. And maybe there's something that gets lost there. The same is true for Netflix. We're all talking about Stranger Things, like we're in the room watching Stranger Things together, but we're not. We're in our homes, in our sweatpants, next to our Doritos, alone, watching Stranger Things and texting people while we watch Stranger Things with our Dorito hands on our phones. And while it feels like we're still sitting in the same room playing Punch-Out together, how many of you grew up doing this? Amen. We are not sitting in the same room playing Punch-Out together anymore. Because of the growth of the video game industry, there is now a glut of inventory on the market. There are more video games available for you to play today than there ever have been. And because large providers like PlayStation and Microsoft don't want you to play in your home with multiple people on the same machine, they've forced you to play on separate consoles across a network, so you're not together in a room playing Punch-Out. You're separate in different rooms playing different video games. The reality is that while the internet has given us a lot of opportunity to do whatever we want, to go wherever we want, to learn whatever we want, it's also created a sense of loneliness, a concept that is commonly referred to as being alone together. And it's really driven us apart in meaningful ways. In particular, research finds that the more time we spend in virtual spaces, which has gone up precipitously over the last 20 years, the less time we're starting to spend in physical spaces, where we used to spend the bulk of our communitarian ways. In particular, we've lost the function of the third place. And the third place is a concept introduced by Ray Oldenburg, a sociologist in the late 80s. And Ray Oldenburg suggests that we humans, we need to socialize. we have to find other people. And so typically what we do is we go to a third place for that. So a first place is your home, and a second place is your work. And then there are these other places where you go in between or after one of those things to find other people who are not your coworkers, your forced community, or your family, your other forced community. And in the past, we've had an explosion of these places. Churches, coffee shops, libraries. These have been our third places. But you can look at the data the Heritage Foundation has, and they found that time in third places has dropped precipitously over the last 10 years, which is directly related to the amount of time we've spent on Facebook and social media and other social networks. We've lost the third place in the way that it used to live in society and the function that it used to provide. Enter the friendly local game store. So this is Metagames over off East Sunshine here. How many of you have been to Metagames? Okay, and how many of you have used Facebook today? Okay, so those numbers are different. This is Metagames. It's a wonderful space. Great inventory, lots of opportunity to buy games, and even more importantly, a lot of opportunity to sit and play games with other people. So this is a Magic the Gathering pre-release. It is also a D&D evening, so Dungeons and Dragons, for those of you who are uninitiated. And if you thought D&D was just for nerds in their parents' basement, you are wrong. It is clearly also for nerds in public now. Metagames is not our only friendly local game store. Nameless City over off South Campbell has a thriving business and has high-functioning, high-volume game nights during the week because there are people who want to go out and play board games. In fact, there are so many people in our community alone who want to go out and play board games that we have thriving local game groups like the 417 Gamers. They average around 500 members. They have over 1,100 members on their meetup site. And on Tuesdays, they're at Nameless City, and on Thursdays, they're at Metagames. And throughout the week, they're scheduling public events to teach games, to run games, to introduce new people to games, and then to really competitively play games that they like with one another. As we continue to find ways to spread the board game habit, friendly local game stores and game groups are becoming the vehicles by which new people, those of you who have not played board games, and people who have been deeply into the hobby for a period of their lives are finding some common ground and learning to work with and play with one another in really productive ways. But why? Why go to a friendly local game store when you could order a game off Amazon and play it at your kitchen table? Really great line from Susie Morgan. She owns Thirsty Meeples in Oxford, which is one of the country's most prolific board game bars. And she says, look, everybody's busy and you want to bring people back together in a way that it's not just staring at screens. It's a natural thing to want to be with other people. And that's what board games are doing for us. They're giving us opportunities and spaces to come back together that isn't sitting behind a screen to mediate our communication. But it's not just the community bit, right? It's also the ownership bit. And this is very important. Because while Facebook is off making content and Sony is off making content and these monolithic companies that exist somewhere in the world are off making content, board games have gone directly to their players to develop a sense of ownership and community. Crowdfunding platforms in particular have been a major part of the boom of board games over the last 10 years. So Kickstarter, Patreon, which is a monthly subscription service, and Indiegogo give people unique opportunities not just to buy games, but to participate in the funding of games. They get to buy the game early by giving money to the creator that is then used for the production, manufacturing, and shipping of the game. And then when the game's done, you get the process. And Kickstarter has really been at the core of the board game boom. For example, since Kickstarter launched, there are 42,300 projects which have launched on that platform under the rubric of games. For what it's worth, only about 30% actually fund, which means they meet their funding goal. It's also of note that that same category, games, has raised nearly $1 billion of crowd-funded resources to develop, produce, manufacture, and games across the globe. Here are some of the biggest Kickstarted projects, and I thought it was worth calling out the top 10 over the last few years. You'll see there that Kingdom Death Monster came in at a little over $12 million for a board game project. I'm probably standing right in the way. For a board game project that'll be out in 2020. And it's not like that's an aberration. Exploding Kittens. How many of you have played Exploding Kittens? That's disgusting. Exploding Kittens is a very tiny card game that exists in a very small box made by a webcomic, and it raised nearly $9 million through Kickstarter. These projects are booming. Scythe, that game I mentioned earlier, isn't even in the top 10 at $1.8 million. So these projects are thriving, and they're driving Kickstarter revenue up, which is, of course, contributing to more projects. It's not just the crowdfunding, though. It's not the opportunity to give the money for the thing I'm going to play and support the creator. It's also the opportunity to play with others and to meet the creators. So at conventions across the globe now, gamers are getting opportunities to go meet board game creators and interact with their content at PAX, which a version of is happening this weekend in San Antonio. At Origins Game Fair in Columbus, which happens in June, and I'll be attending. At Moon City Con in Springfield, Missouri in September, you can come out, learn about a bunch of new games, and buy as many as you can afford. And then, of course, there's the big guy, Gen Con. And Gen Con has been happening for over 50 years. It happens in Indianapolis. It's across 4 different days, and I was fortunate enough to go last year. They estimate that 61,000 people attended Gen Con in 2018. And one of the most exciting parts of Gen Con is that a lot of new games launch there. So if you're the first into the dealer hall where they set up all the vendors, you can get access to games that no one has ever seen before. In fact, there's quite an important ritual around running into the dealer hall and being the first to a table to buy that game you've been waiting for. This is what it looks like. A friend of mine from Australia took this video standing above the balcony at the entrance to the vendor hall when they opened the doors. And for 4 days, this is pretty much what it looks like. And there's even a name for this ritual. They call it the running of the nerds. And you either get in or get out of the way or get trampled. It is quite a sight. And the reason people do this is because there are a lot of producers there, content creators who have a limited number of first-run games. And if you don't get it there, you're not going to get it until it reprints or they do a mass production run. So this is a very important part of that day. And it's a very important part of the experience for the gamer. Because they go to a table and they don't just buy a game, they meet the creator at that table to buy that game. Here's another example of how that works. So that game I told you about earlier, Scythe, which is my favorite game. Scythe's creator is Jamie Stegmaier, and he's very active on social media and on his blog, and I thought, if anybody can talk about why board games are booming and why it's important for people to feel a sense of ownership in board games, why don't I just ask Jamie? So I sent him a message on Facebook. We've never met. I said, 1, I'm going to fangirl a little bit, and we talked about Scythe for a minute. And then I said, 2, I'd really like to know why you think board games are booming and why you think it's important to stay involved with your players. And this is what he sent back to me. Within a half an hour, we were having a pretty robust dialogue over email. And one of the things that really struck me is he said, people love to talk about their experiences, share photos, ask questions, and by being present, I show people that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. Board games allow people to feel like they're in on the process, like the thing they're playing is not some abstract product, but rather something they had a hand in creating, in building, in coming up with a design for, and in working with the creator on. And it has contributed to an incredible sense of community and pride for gamers. But then there's this one last bit, right, which is like, how much do we as humans just like to obsess over things? And we like to obsess over things tremendously. Board gamers do this really in 2 ways. So the first way is they post pictures of all of their board games, and they call them board game shelfies. I wish that were a joke. If it was, I couldn't write it. This is a real phenomenon. Go on Instagram, Google this, and you will find countless pictures of people taking pictures of their games. Because one of the things which really typifies a great board gamer in the modern era is to show off the amount of games they play. So here's this person's board game shelfie, and here's this person's much more organized and frankly OCD-friendly board game shelfie. And here's this person's board game shelfie, less organized. And all of these are opportunities for people to say, look how into this hobby I am, look how obsessed I am, look how much of a fan I am. And also it's a way to start conversations. Because as people post these pictures, you can look at that wall and you can go, oh, Twilight Imperium, I will never touch that game, tell me why you enjoy it. And it's a real opportunity for people to have conversations about this shared language, these shared interests and these shared values that we otherwise may not have. So part of the way that board game culture cultivates this sense of obsession is through shelfies, but the other way is through argument. Nerds can really argue a lot, and I wanted to show you how much arguing a nerd could do. So I've gotten on Board Game Geek here, and Board Game Geek is kind of the website for board games. You go to learn about games, see how games are reviewed or rated, and then you can get on the forums and you can argue, you can debate about games. So this is a thread about which sleeves you should put on your cards for which games. Why? Well, because fingers are disgusting, and over time they will ruin cards. And so if you really spend a lot of money on a game, say, I don't know, $100, like a game I'm going to show you in a minute, you don't want to get it ruined. So you put sleeves on them. Okay, fine, that seems simple enough. Well, what if I told you that this was a 68-page thread of people arguing about what sleeves to put on what cards for what games? Because that's what we do as humans, right? You may look at this and go, nerds, and you're probably right. But you can't tell me you don't have this. Something is your argument about which sleeves to put on which cards for which games. And we, board gamers, just have a really robust forum for that opportunity. So board games really do give us an opportunity to obsess. We can show off our games, we can show off our collection, we can show off our knowledge and our commitment, and we can argue until we are blue in the face about how we would interpret a rule, how we would cover a card, and how you think you might win a game or the best strategy for winning a game. So they create a sense of community, a sense of ownership, a sense of fanaticism, which are all implicit, I believe, in the human condition. But to the original question, can they save humanity? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that could get us. And zombies seem like a real risk. Nuclear apocalypse used to be a joke. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's still around. So it feels like there's a lot of stuff out there that board games aren't going to fix. But I do know this. We spend a lot of time arguing about stuff like walls and who counts as a human and who should get to make decisions about their body. And if that's what we're going to do, and that's the future, I don't think this is the place for it. I think these are the place for it. Sitting down at a table to be Jack Burton for a minute, but also to have conversations with your friends, to get together people and have a beer and learn and practice the skill of having a conversation and disagreement and sharing values and beliefs without getting mad at each other or hiding behind a phone. I think these are the places where families come together, and I think these are the places where new people meet each other and learn how to be friends, learn how to understand difference. And I think that these are the places that really give us our best opportunity to develop social networks, to understand other people and act like humans, not like machines. So can board game night save humanity? I don't know. But I do know that it's probably a lot better than what we're currently doing as a solution. If you're interested in participating in one of those and want to be a part of what I think is an actual action which brings people together in the ways we always hoped the internet might, then there's a lot you can do to learn more. Go to the 417 Gamers page on Facebook. Find out when they're hosting events. Or follow up with me. I'll be in the hallway after this event, and you can find me on social media. You could also pre-order, if you wanted, a game that I made to learn more about the hobby. But really and truly, I think that this is a unique opportunity and a unique time for people to find new means for learning about others, coming together, communicating, and practice the art of disagreement, discourse, persuasion, and rhetoric. And I think board games may be our best hope for that. Thank you.